Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. My name is Sarah Collins, and I'm an occupational therapist and homeschooling parent. Today, we are going to continue on with a series on the auditory system, and I'd love to welcome Anna Galloway. She is an occupational therapist and former music therapist whose passion lies in the blending of the power of music with the practice of OT. Anna explains how and why music can regulate emotions, support sensory needs, and help families build connection. You'll hear her expert insights on using music in everyday life, tips for navigating musical interests in large families, and practical advice for parents looking to make meaningful use of music at home. So whether you're a homeschooling parent, a therapist, or someone just curious about music's impact on the brain and learning, this episode is filled with actionable ideas and heartfelt stories. So tune in as we uncover how music and occupational therapy make a harmonious pair. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. With me today, I have Anna Galloway, who actually has a background in both music therapy and occupational therapy, which I'm super excited to see how you have melded the both of those. So can you go ahead first? Can you just share a little about your story and how you ended up where you are?
Yeah, so I started my career off as a music therapist. So I graduated from the University of Alabama. And then after graduating with my bachelor's in music therapy, we moved to Chicago, which is where I launched my music therapy career. So I did a lot of private contracting. I worked in a lot of different settings, including I worked with families of refugees. I worked with older adults with dementia. I worked in inpatient mental health and psychiatric programs. I worked in hospice and home health. I did a lot of things around the city. I also did some early intervention. And then I worked for about 8 years and decided I wanted to see what else I could do outside of just doing music intervention. So I found occupational therapy when I was working in an inpatient rehab center up in Chicago and went back to school. And I've been an occupational therapist now for 7 years, and now I'm a faculty member. And my research is all about putting music in the occupational therapy world. So trying to blend the professions together while having distinct professional identities in each one, but how the two can collaborate together and work together to do what could be the most beneficial for our families.
I feel like your background and mine are very similar. I started out as a recreation therapist.
Oh my gosh.
Very much the similar thing. All of those different areas. I worked in home health, I worked in psychiatrics, and then it was actually an inpatient rehab where I found out about OT and
Yes.
back to school for that, and have
Oh
so
my
much
gosh.
of what I talk about now with families has to do with play and leisure and recreation, since that was my first join into the therapy field. I love that.
Great. Yeah, I loved working with recreational therapists. It was such a fun place to be, having this really great collaborative and creative
Yeah,
team.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I actually, now looking back on it, sometimes I'm like, why? I spent my afternoons when I was working in inpatient rehab with kids. We would go everywhere to all these community outings. It was so fun. And I'm like, why? Why did I stop doing that? But actually, now that's a lot of what I'm doing with my own kids is learning through life. And I've taken so much of what that was and applied it now to our homeschool, which is,
Absolutely.
it's just been beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
So I initially reached out to you because focusing like on these episodes, these most recent ones, we've been talking a lot about auditory processing. So defining auditory processing, what that disorder would look like if kids do struggle, how that affects reading, how it affects language, everything altogether. And even before that, I have had Mandy Doman on from the listening program to talk about music and rhythm and how that can affect executive functioning. So all of those are going to be linked here in the show notes. But what I want to know more, it would be about like the general music and the brain. So not specific programs, but just general. So how have you used music throughout your therapy career and how can it have an effect on doing what we need and want to do in our daily life?
Yeah, this is a great question. If I get too general or too narrow, please help me get back
Okay.
to the best way to answer. But yeah, so one of the most amazing things about music is that it impacts the way that our body produces different types of hormones. So it releases dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. So those three things together are super powerful. And with that in mind, we can use music in a way to help impact how the body is responding in the moment into different stimuli and different parts of life. So when we're using music for end of life care for hospice, right? So we use music a lot of times for just building some relaxation and helping bodies to relax and to not have adversive responses to the stimulus in the environment. It also is a way for coping and helping families to feel more at ease and comfortable with each other in these moments. I also use music in the NICU in a similar ways, right? So we're using music to help calm the body, calm the physiological responses that we're having, and also to provide comfort and bonding between the new baby and the family. And so music can be used in a lot of different ways for environmental support, for emotional support, and also to help regulate whatever somebody's responses might be.
So for people who have never heard, the terms, which I'm sure we've all heard dopamine right now, there's lots of books
Mhm.
and things that are talking about dopamine addiction and things like that. But for those who have never really heard more about serotonin, oxytocin, can you dive into those a little bit more?
Yeah, so dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a role in like our motivation and pleasure and reward system. So it can help us feel good and build those, I don't know, like the happiness comes
Yeah.
out. It also helps with attention and concentration and focus. So dopamine can help regulate what's happening. And then serotonin is a neurotransmitter and hormone that also plays a crucial role in regulating your mood, sleep, appetite, and other body functions. Now, oxytocin is the really cool one because it's about social bonding and love and building these like really good feel good social connections. So with music, being able to improve mood, improve like your body responses, and also build social bonding, it can be a really important piece if used appropriately in the correct context.
So when you say used appropriately, is that based on like how does the person know what does appropriately mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of our research in music therapy shows that any type of music use that is person centered or the client's preference is going to be way more effective than some prescriptive type of music. If you I read different research articles and I see in different healthcare professions that they will say, oh, this study is based on the use of relaxation music, and it's defined in a way that whoever created the study thinks relaxation music could be, but what's relaxing to me might be different for someone else. So, really, individual choice is what's going to lead to the most effective result for a person.
So a person could find heavy metal music relaxing just the
Yeah.
same as like classical music could be.
Yeah. So, for me, I love classical music and I
Yeah.
will listen to some big symphonies and I am so zen. But if my husband hears that, he's going to be like, oh, please turn this off. He wants like folk music. So, it's a very different response. Mainly because of whatever our upbringing is, whatever our past experiences are, it shapes our interests. So we
Yeah.
want to make sure we're honoring who the individual person is.
Oh, I love that. But when you're using it in the NICU or with younger kids, you wouldn't necessarily even know that. So how do you know, or what are you looking for to see whether it is calming for them?
That's a great question. So we're looking at nonverbal responses in the NICU, and I talk about NICU and hospice pretty similarly because they're both pretty medically fragile, and there are a lot of other emotional things happening. And I find the populations very different, but some of the ways that I approach them are similar. So in the NICU, what we would do is we would play music at a very slow tempo. We want it to be something that could be absorbed and processed by the infant. So we were playing live music for infants at least 28 weeks gestational age and older. And so we would play at least 60 beats per minute or slower. And we would get rid of all syncopation. So everything is on the rhythm. So
Huh,
if you
yeah.
sing songs like the wheels on the bus go round and round, it would be more like the wheels on the bus go round and round. And we would even try and get rid of that syncopation of on the bus and
Yeah.
even drag it out a little bit longer. But we're looking for the infant to respond by maybe orienting their face towards us. If they're turning their head towards us, they're engaged and they're not trying to get away. We're also making sure there's no hand halting signs. So if you see like a hand come up like this, that is like a hand as a stop sign. That means that they're wanting to get away and they're building a barrier just naturally. Crying, of course, grimacing, we don't want
Yeah.
that. Any redness or like vasodilating where they're holding their breath, we definitely don't want that. So if we see any adverse responses, we stop the music, we stop everything,
Yeah.
help them regulate. And sometimes we would use music, one, to mask the sounds of the environment so that their bodies could relax because there are alarms and beeping and all sorts of things and other babies crying. Or we could use music to build their tolerance for stimulation. We would use music and maybe only play for 30 seconds and then try and build up from there. But the goal is not to create dysregulation.
Wow. Even just hearing you talk about how the tempo and then the reaction of kids and how we can notice that so much of what I've been thinking a lot about within writing the Chameleon Tale, which we talked about earlier, but was using this declarative language and saying, I observe this in your body. When I see you clench your shoulders or when I see you put up your hand this way, what is happening from there. And so you're saying from a really young age that you're able to
Mhm.
see this, and especially in reaction to music.
Yeah. And we would play music for people in the ICU and do things like that as well. And we're looking for the same responses. So if the body's turning towards you, that's a great sign. So we would even try this with different types of music genres. So say I'm working with a patient and I try gospel music, and that there's no physiological reason that I can't play music. Like they're not going to have medical instability from my music because they're
Yeah.
stable. And so I'm going to play gospel music and I see them, oh, and try and get away from me. I'm going to go,
Yeah.
okay, let's try something else. So then I might go to like Beatles or something different and pull
Yeah.
in a different genre. And then they might turn towards it. I'm like, oh, I'm on the right track. And so you
Awesome.
keep
Yeah.
going in that direction till you can really identify what music they are most interested in because you're
Yeah.
creating that individual, almost an individual playlist for what
Yeah.
the client might like.
That's fascinating. Since it is so individualized, and here we are talking about homeschool family, where we may
Mhm.
have kids who are in range from birth all the way up to 18, 19, as before they're headed out of the house, or sometimes one kid, sometimes two kids, sometimes eight kids, right? What do we do if people's interests aren't the same?
That is a great question. So I think the intent behind what the music is being used for. So if there's a kiddo that's like in a state of dysregulation, they would need the individualized music in that moment to help them because the goal would be regulation. But
Right.
if we're looking at using music for an education purpose, so we're learning ABCs, we're learning how to say hello, learning social engagement, then that's the music should be presented in that way. This is a cool learning tool. And if you notice some kids becoming disengaged in those moments, shorten the time period. Do one song, take a 10-minute break, come back and try again. Don't try and do 40 minutes straight of different types of songs. And then if the purpose is for just like social or leisure enjoyment, giving choice so that the kids, a lot of times when I was working in inpatient units, I would have every patient put in what music would they like to listen to during this leisure activity that we're doing. So maybe we're doing art or something else, but we're listening to music. So then everyone works collaboratively to create the playlist and everyone is represented on it. And we will only have enough time of music to make sure we can actually listen to everyone's request and not have to cut off early.
Oh, I love that. Like how we can all compile our own playlist and you get like one song here
Mhm.
there for the other kiddo. And that's our amount of time that we're gonna do
Yeah.
this task. Yeah, so much of even time management. We talk about
Mhm.
that a lot. We're gonna work on this for 20 minutes or whatever. But when we as parents have been like, oh, I'll be there in a minute, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and it's 20 minutes later, our kids don't necessarily know how long a
Hmm.
minute is just because of our speech. But if we say something like, we're going to listen to this for 3 songs, we know the beginning and the end already.
Yeah. And whenever the song would come up, like whenever the song, I would say, who chose this one? Tell
Yeah.
us why you chose this. And they would say, oh, it's a song I used to listen to with my grandpa, or oh, it's a song that makes me feel like I have confidence or something, so they can share a little bit about themselves too and build that social connection. And then other kids have the opportunity to say, oh my gosh, I like this one too.
Listen to that collaboration. I love it.
Hmm.
Hey, listeners, we're going to take a quick break from our chat, but I have something super special to share with you. If you've been loving the stories and strategies that we talk about each week, you're going to want to check out our brand new book, co authored by me and Jackie Adrian, called A Chameleon Tale, A Colorful Sensory Story. It's the perfect resource for anyone navigating the beautiful and sometimes challenging world of sensory needs and neurodiversity with their kiddos. Our book follows Sally and Seth, two adorable chameleons on their journey to the Chameleon Cafe, highlighting how every family member's sensory experience can be unique. Not only is it gorgeously illustrated by Jackie, seriously, these chameleons are so cute. But it's also designed as a meaningful conversation tool that you can use with your child to help them recognize and express what's going on inside their bodies. Imagine having a story that you can read together where your child can say, hey, I feel like Seth today. I need and then list one of the compensation strategies that Seth uses. And for parents, it's a way to give your children a language to talk about their feelings and their bodies. Plus, you'll find ideas for regulation strategies to try together. The book is available for order right now. Yes, right now. You can find A Chameleon Tale on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can request it at your favorite local bookstore or find it and its free book guide at homeschoolot.com/a-chameleon-tale. So support two mama authors, grow your family's emotional toolbox, and get a beautiful keepsake for your bookshelf. Order today and review it, and let's keep changing lives, one story at a time. Now, back to the episode. I know that you are an advocate for using music within occupational therapy. What exactly does that look like? Like, how have you now been able to merge the fields of music therapy and occupational therapy?
That's a really great question. I think one of my research project for my doctoral program was actually creating a training for OTs so that they can learn how to use music more effectively. But in order to understand what the training needed to entail, I had to understand what knowledge do OTs have about music.
Yeah.
And you have this range. You have tons of OTs who were like musicians, played in a band, like marching band, not like they all had their own bands. And you might even have people who just listen to it leisurely, but you also have people who don't really have a lot of experience with it, and music is intimidating.
Me.
So
That's why I'm asking all these questions for
yeah,
sure.
music can be intimidating because it's like you're suddenly being asked to be a creative person. And if you're not comfortable with being creative or not comfortable with trying and figuring out what might work and what might not, you really do feel outside of your comfort zone. So a lot of the training that I did is really based around becoming more comfortable with the ambiguity of what music can be.
Yeah.
Music doesn't have to be like great enough to be on a recorded album. Music can just be holding a rhythm and humming or just having a rhythm and marching in our yard. I do that with my son all the time. I'm like, let's go out and march. And we just march to a rhythm. And then he'll start to hum. And then we just create this natural music together, which is really a beautiful thing, like this, the creative side. So for OTs, I had to really break down what music is. And so we have rhythm, we have tempo and pace. So if we're looking at like how many beats per minute are in a song, if you're listening to faster music, you're going to have a different physiological response than if you're listening to slower paced music. So if we're wanting a client to work quickly, then we might use faster music to help with like a cleanup song to
Yeah.
me should be a little bit higher clipped pace so that everyone is learning how to clean up quickly and we're moving forward with the transition versus if we're really trying to settle into a task, we're going to go into a slower type of song. So teaching OTs that you have control over music. You can choose
Yeah.
what you want to do. And so there's some really great websites available, like I think It's the beats per minute website, but you can look up any song or look up any beat per minute and get a list of all the songs that have that beat.
If
And
there
they
is a tempo when you're saying you want something faster for a cleanup song, that type of, what would that typical beat per minute be?
Yeah, so if we're thinking like a walking pace would be about 1 step per second. So a 60 beat per minute. So that is where I kind of start. And I'm noticing are kids moving slower than that or moving faster than that? And if they are moving faster than that, then I might go up a little bit more to 80 beats per minute and see does that match their natural rhythm a little better? And if
Okay.
I'm noticing kids are moving slower than the 60 beat, maybe I go a little bit slower so that they can start to, we call it entrainment, where
Yeah.
you're entraining your own natural body rhythm with the music that's being provided.
Fascinating. I'm just
And
thinking
we
of
also,
all
oh,
the parents who are asking, how do I help my child with transitions between it during the day, between we're at lunch now, we're all eating, and now it's time to dive back into math or whatever. And that
mhm.
transition time can be really difficult. So specifically choosing some music based on these beats per minute could be
Yeah.
life-changing, really.
And it takes a moment to really just observe. And you're just watching the kid and you're saying, okay, he's got a lot of energy, he's moving fast.
Yeah.
And we call this in music therapy the ISO principle, where you meet the person where they are and
Yeah.
you slowly move them to where you want them to go. So if they're moving at a fast, high clipped pace, we're going to start there and we're
Yeah.
going to slowly move to the pace that we want them to be at. And their body just naturally entrains and they calm down and then we're good to go.
Look at that. Look at that. Okay, so for our kiddos, let's say that we are moving, we're transitioning and we are moving into something that we need to be sitting, which thankfully in the homeschool world, there is less time that you need to be sitting than I would say in the average schooling
Mhm.
philosophy. But for our kids that really struggle with that, how can we help them to, can music be helpful in that situation?
Yes, I do. I do think there are some opportunities there, especially if music can be created as the reward for something. So I think we never want music to be a punishment. We never want music to feel like it is work or it is therapy, unless of course you're doing like music lessons where you do have to put in some work.
My son, when he was taking piano at the beginning, he was totally all in. I was like, 15 minutes, dude, you're gonna crank it out.
Yes, sometimes you have to be like, okay, for 15 minutes, you got to sit
Yeah.
down. But if we're using music in our day-to-day rhythm and what we're trying to do to help structure our days, then music can be used as the reward there. So it might even be like, okay, what songs at the beginning of the day, you could write down all the songs that a kid wants to hear that day. And
Yeah.
you could even have them listed and ready, and they're like, oh, I'm going to say Baby Shark because it's the only one that's in my head.
I
I
know.
I try not to sing that
I was gonna say,
myself.
speaking of punishment, is awful.
It'll be a reward for your child, punishment for you. But it's great because you could also say, okay, we're going to sit down for 15 minutes. And when we're done, we're going to take a movement music break. So we're going to come in, we're going to sit. And if we get up and we're moving too much, we're going to have to reset and start that 15 minutes over. So you can use timers along
Yeah.
with music, but then music can be built in as the reward piece and build in movement breaks or brain breaks, all the things that are needed.
So we did mention a little bit about music lessons. Is that something that you feel should be pushed? Is are music lessons really important for our kids?
I might be biased and I will say yes. I really think that learning instruments at a young age is super beneficial. I started playing when I was 4 and I played piano at a very young age. I loved it. Of course, there were years, like my adolescent years, I was like, I never want to see a piano again. But I loved it. It gave me structure. It taught me discipline. And you're also learning a different language. And I am much more, I think, more agile mentally with picking up other languages because I understand how to read music and how to interpret it. And I think that is something that you can't really replicate.
Yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. My son, like I mentioned before, he wanted to learn to play because we were listening to the Penderwicks, which is fantastic read aloud. And so we were listening to it, and their 4-year-old played the piano. And so he wanted to learn to play, and he was 4 as well.
Wow.
And he was in it for 4-ish years or so. And then he just lost interest. And so we've decided for now, we're just going to hold off and let him wait because it is very expensive. Yeah, can we talk about that for a second?
Yes. Something I wish that existed is some type of like an intro to how to play music or how to like look at music and noticing music on different instruments. I really took to piano because it's linear. It's just all in front of me. You can see every single note that's possible.
Yeah.
And that helped me be able to translate that over to being able to pick up guitar and banjo and violin and flutes. I'm able to play a lot of other instruments because I have this system of what the notes look like.
Yeah.
But it is an expensive hobby, especially if you're going into like violin lessons can be very expensive. But there are some types of teach along tools. And I don't know if, am I allowed to mention a brand or anything?
Yeah, of course.
So like the Loog guitar,
Okay.
that one, the Loog guitar, they create them for smaller kids. So like I have a 3 string for my son that he is learning to play, and it's small enough and it comes with an app that is showing you when to play the certain notes and which note to pick, and it gives you all the tuning so you know that you're playing the right notes. And the cost is just buying the instrument and then you get the app and then you're good to go. And it's at his pace, and I'm not forcing something on him at
Right.
this young of an
Right.
age.
I will make sure that is linked in the show notes
Hmm.
too. All right, a final thing, because you've talked a lot about music, which I love. You've talked about
Hmm.
occupational therapy. You've talked about merging the two. So if a kiddo has a lot of interest in music and their
Hmm.
parents are seeing we do have supports that we need for our child to be successful in what they need and want to do. That's the occupation. So they're looking maybe for an OT who is going to be using music. What
Hmm.
would be some questions that they should ask, parents should ask when they're going in, or some specific program, anything that they would need to know when going into an OT to make sure that they're following along with this?
That's a great question. Currently, there isn't additional training for OTs really to learn how to use music, which is what I'm working on to
Yeah,
creating. I'm
except
hoping
for
to
what
have
there
that
will
out.
be.
But the idea of just asking the right questions of I'm a big believer in making sure that whoever I'm bringing into my kid's life matches the values of what I'm looking for too. So the individualized component, what do they do if a child becomes dysregulated or disruptive or has some type of behavior that might be perceived as negative? So we're just trying to see like how would they redirect and what could they do? And then also asking questions on how do you integrate the interests that my child has into the therapy that you're doing, and what access do you have to the equipment that are the interests to my child?
These are fantastic. And I think actually fantastic for in general for OTs, not just that are going to be using music. That question of how do you have access to things that my child would be
Mhm.
interested in is a great question to ask at any point.
And I think if you have a therapist who is saying, "Oh, we just don't have that," but they'll like what we do have or something. I want to, I always want to make sure that I'm pulling someone into my child's life that is, again, aligning to my own values, but also very open to new ways of doing things. Every therapist has the tools to learn, and if I want to make sure that they're open to that too.
Well, I want to like shout for joy because yes, that is what I talk about so much on here. We are
Yeah.
building our team to work with our kids. And so to invite someone in, yes, like
Mhm.
homeschooling is not alone schooling. So it is really helpful to build that team, but we want to make sure that they are open to learning and open
Mhm.
to meeting our kids where they are.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, Anna, thank you so much for being here. And how
Yes.
can
Thank you for having me.
people find you?
Yes, so I am a professor at the University of Florida, so you can always reach out to me at my email from the university website, and I am open to answering questions if needed. Good.
Awesome. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Before you go, I want to be sure that you know about a brand new free resource video for those of you that hear the infamous words, I can't. So we often want to respond argumentatively with, yes, you can, which can backfire and spark more resistance. Instead, this video will offer practical strategies for reframing the conversation, fostering open communication, and providing the right support so your child feels empowered to take on challenges and really build that grit. Visit homeschoolot.com or click the link in the show notes to watch the free video and help you and your child navigate those I can't moments together.